Thank you, everybody, for being here. Means a lot. And this is week 3. Weeks 1 and 2 are on YouTube. Um, if you were to want to go back and rewatch anything, you can. So, which is cool.
You have an app or something?
It's on the Crossroads page. So,
Thank you.
yeah. So, and I think going forward, they'll all end up on YouTube. So, hello, how are you? Good. But yeah, so we will just get into this. So, welcome to week 3 of biblical interpretations. Let's recap quickly what we've gone through the past 2 weeks. My name is James Kaufman. I'm a husband and a father, and I own an automotive preservation business. I have a degree in biblical and theological studies in ancient. Yes, those are pictures of me back in the day. So I have a degree in biblical and theological studies in ancient Near Eastern history. Although I'm not an expert in anything. So we discussed in week 1 some rules for the class. Fundamentally, if you don't like something I say, I just ask for grace and forgiveness and understanding, because nothing about the topics we discuss are easy. I am not a perfect person, and I don't expect you to be me, and I also don't have any expectations of you. So far, we have been discussing 2 foundational assumptions that I make for this class. Week 1, we discussed what's called hermeneutics. Hermeneutics is the theory and methodology of interpretation. We discussed how every day we make all sorts of assumptions in our interpretations that can have a vast effect on interpretive meaning. Let's see. I propose that doing what one can to diminish the gap in time, culture, and language between today and the settings of the biblical text. I propose that's an excellent means of finding interpretive meaning. This class will seek to show how language, history, cultures, geography, classism, politics, logistics, and historical theology are all relevant factors in interpretive meaning of the biblical text. I do not seek to propose a certainty of being right. At best, I do propose the spectrum of options for interpretive meaning is finite, and at least one of the options will allow you to have meaningful meaning. I propose to offer a spectrum of possibilities of interpretations of the biblical text. Last week, we began our discussion of the second foundational assumption that I make for this class. We discussed epistemology and the idea that all moments in the present, the totality of human knowledge is fully known. I use epistemology in a specific way based on my perception of how knowledge works. And I believe that framework in and of itself is the very thing the biblical text is concerned with. In other words, a fundamental hermeneutic or interpretive method I hold about the biblical text is that it is deeply concerned with specific epistemological matters. We used a circle to represent the totality of all human knowledge. We discussed how humanity perceives the evolution of human knowledge as an ongoing expansion. But then we discussed how at all times the boundary of what is known versus unknown is stubbornly persistent. How there is a boundary to what is known, And thus, our perception of the expansion of knowledge is actually a compression of data between non-existence and the unknown. We picked an arbitrary set of data to seek to answer an arbitrary question. How many home runs are possible for a human to hit in an MLB season? And we established in MLB history, it is known that it is possible for a human on steroids to hit 73 home runs. And it is possible for a human not on steroids to hit 62 home runs. So we are left with this epistemological circle, and we can determine it doesn't matter what the thing is, there's always a point of 0 and a point of 1. It also doesn't matter how many numbers you add going out, the shape doesn't change. For any given thing, 0 is the point of non-existence, and that is known. 1 is the point of existence and is known. The point of the limitation of knowledge is known, and thus the point of the unknown is known. This shape I call a paradigm. A paradigm is a pattern of thought, and what I find is everything known can be charted on this spectrum, beginning at the point in which it sprung into existence and branches out into the unknown. The more data you have, or more expansion rings there are, the more assured you can be in what you know pertaining to the differences between what is known and unknown regarding to that thing. Some things, like home runs, are very, very easy to chart. Some things are much more complicated to chart. But this paradigm, I believe, is extremely useful in thinking about reality, and it's probably my key interpretive hermeneutic to the biblical text. I then showed you how we can take this idea and visualize it in different manners. Now I have to make a retraction from last week because I made a mistake. When I showed this chart last week, I went off my script and I said there were entire fields of mathematics concerned with the act of plotting points of data. And I said that that is what trigonometry was. I am not a mathematician, so please excuse my mistake. What I meant to say is that's what calculus is. We then went back to a word study that we did in week 1, and we see this spectrum of options of interpretive meaning. 0 is non-existence or meaningless. 11 is meaning beyond human comprehension. You can take that framework and apply it to any interpretation. It's possible to read something and believe that it means nothing. It's possible to read something and believe that that its meaning is beyond comprehension. And you can see everything in between if you take the time to go through it. We then closed last week with this slide, this black and white picture. It doesn't look like much, but it is everything. So now we will begin week 3, or part 2 of epistemology. So let's begin. I ended last week with this slide. I made a comment last week when discussing the expansion of home runs, and I said on a spectrum of 0 through 10, there is one point in the history of home runs that is the most important. And that point is what happens between 0 and 1. Or what happened between when MLB home runs did not exist and when they did exist. I'm talking about the moment in time between existence and non-existence. Close your eyes and imagine for a second. Try and imagine nothing. Imagine nothingness. Imagine non-existence. The reality is you can't imagine nothing. And every time you do, you are thinking of something. The reason being is because you exist. And existence can't comprehend non-existence. For me, the closest I think I can get to imagining nothingness is blackness. And I would bet that that is true for most people. Just black. I don't imagine green. I don't imagine red. I don't imagine a tree. I don't imagine a thing. I imagine blackness. So this slide may not look like it, but this slide is actually a picture of an incredible painting. It's one of the best paintings ever. I genuinely could stare at this picture for hours. I find it mesmerizing. Isn't it incredible? It's just so beautiful.
Green is working by the way, right?
You don't see anything? How do you not see the picture? There is a picture here, I promise. Well, let's try this. If you can't see this, let's try this. How about this? Can you see the picture now? Do you see the picture? Does anyone know what this is a picture of? Can you make it out? How about now? Maybe some of you now know what this picture is. But in case you still aren't certain, let's try this. How about now? This is a picture called Starry Night by Van Gogh. One of the most famous pictures ever made. I was not lying to you earlier when I showed you the slide on the left. Starry Night is there. You just can't see it. You are not epistemologically capable of knowing its existence. But on the right, you know what the picture is, clear as day. Here is a spectrum of Starry Night, showing different levels of light being added or subtracted to the picture. Notice the differences between what you can comprehend and know about the picture as you move up from dark to light. You can't epistemologically know anything about the photo when it's at 0. Your very first moment of knowing anything is at 1. The advancement of epistemological understanding of the picture is minuscule as you move from 30% through 75%. And the differences between 9 and 10 bring us back to a lack of epistemological comprehension. Thus, it is the differences between black and white that allows us to comprehend. The binary of non-existence and existence allows for understanding. This is what makes knowledge. Epistemology is the act of the movement from 0 through 10. This is an incredibly famous picture from one of my favorite artists. This is from the artist Henri Matisse. I love Matisse's work because he encapsulates the binary of existence and non-existence so well. Matisse said this: I don't paint things. I only paint the difference between things. If you could take a microscope and zoom in to the absolute finest detail in one of his pictures, you'll only see one of three things. You'll see either only blue, or you'll see only white. Or if you zoom in right at the exact line where Matisse created a distinction between blue and white, you'll see this. You'll see the exact difference between the non-existence of his art and the existence of his art. In fact, this is true of everything. If you take a TV or a computer screen or a phone and you zoom all the way in as far as you can go, every image you see is just individual pixels that flash on and off. And it's the differences between each pixel that allows you to epistemologically perceive an image. Everyone be quiet and listen. What do you hear? What are you hearing? This is one of my favorite songs ever. You hear it? You don't hear anything, do you? How about now? This is without a doubt one of the best songs ever made. It's called Clair de Lune by Claude Debussy. And do you know what Debussy said about music? He said, music is not in the notes, but in the space in between. Now, nobody actually knows if Debussy said this, but it is often attributed to him. Some attribute the phrase to Mozart. Or another example that is known, Miles Davis said, "It's not the notes you play, it's the notes you don't play." I'm a drummer, and this is something as a drummer I deeply understand, for this is all rhythm is. It's just off and on of noise. That's it. What do they mean by this? It's the differences between sound and silence that allows for epistemological comprehension of music, or of beauty, or art, of perception, of creation, O's and ones, on and off. One of my favorite statements, you never stop clapping your hands. It's just that the length of time between claps changes. So to recap.
Say that again, 'cause I don't think they caught it. So you know what he said? He said, you never stop clapping your hands. I'll say it again.
So you never stop clapping your hands. It's just the length of time between claps changes. So to recap, non-existence is zero, or blackness. Existence is one, or the movement in time any given thing distinguishes itself from non-existence. Anything above one is the evolution of epistemological understanding. 10 is the boundary of potential human knowledge. 11 is beyond, or the fullness of light. And so everything that is known exists in the infinitesimal moment in between the differences of white and black. Maybe let's try to zoom in to the absolute smallest detail and see this line. Let's see how small the gap between nothing and nothing is. The problem is, if I zoom in, this is what it looks like. If I zoom in some more, This is what it looks like. If I zoom in even farther, this is what it looks like. And we just keep going and going and going. Just keep going. And it's not going to change. Problem is, the more we try to perceive the fullness of the differences between the two, our epistemological understanding of the differences does not change. We can't perceive it, but oh boy, do we try. And so, a single line contains everything. You know what is interesting about lines? You know, mathematically, this line exists to infinity, going forever in both directions. And yet, paradoxically, it is contained. Do you also know that there's an infinite number of numbers that exist between the numbers 0 and 1? Every number that is possible to exist can exist between the numbers 0 and 1. It's very interesting to think about. Now, for time's sake, I'm not going to get into it, but understand the line and the circle are visualizing the same thing. They're equals. So going back to our original circle, there's an infinity of non-existence contained in the circle. I put an extremely thin red line, the width of a single pixel, around the edge of this circle. I don't even know if it's possible to see it, but that red line is our existence. It contains the totality of all human knowledge. Then there's an infinity of white space going forever in all directions beyond anything we can know. And so this is epistemology, the knowledge of existence versus non-existence of everything. Bereshit bara Elohim et ha-shamayim ve'et ha-aretz. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. The earth was without form and void, and darkness was over the face of the deep. And the Spirit of God was hovering over the face of the waters. And God said, "Let there be light." And God saw that the light was good. And God separated the light from the darkness. God called the light day, and the darkness he called night. And there was evening and there was morning, the first day. And God said, "Let there be an expanse in the midst of the waters, and let it separate the waters from the waters." And God made the expanse and separated the waters that were under the expanse from the waters that were above the expanse. And it was so. And God called the expanse heaven, and there was evening and there was morning, the second day. And God said, "Let the waters under the heavens be gathered together into one place, and let the dry land appear." And it was so. God called the dry land earth, and the waters that were gathered together he called seas. And God saw that it was good. And God said, "Let the earth sprout vegetation, plants yielding seed, and fruit trees bearing fruit, in which is their seed, each according to its kind, on the earth." And it was so. The earth brought forth vegetation, plants yielding seed according to their own kinds, and trees bearing fruit, in which is their seed, each according to its kind. And there was evening and there was morning, the third day. And God said, "Let there be lights in the expanse of the heavens to separate the day from the night. And let them be for signs and for seasons and for days and years. and let them be the lights in the expanse of the heavens to give light upon the earth. And it was so. And God made the two great lights, the greater light to rule the day, and the lesser light to rule the night, and the stars. And God set them in the expanse of the heavens to give light on the earth, to rule over the day and over the night, and to separate the light from the darkness. And God saw that it was good. And there was evening, and there was morning, the fourth day. And God said, let the waters swarm with swarms of living creatures, and let birds fly above the earth across the expanse of the heavens. So God created the great sea creatures and every living creature that moves, with which the waters swarm, according to their kinds, and every winged bird according to its kind. And God saw that it was good. And God blessed them, saying, be fruitful and multiply, and fill the waters in the seas, and let birds multiply on the earth. And there was evening, and there was morning, the fifth day. And God said, let the earth bring forth living creatures according to their kinds, livestock and creeping things, and beasts of the earth according to their kinds. And it was so. And God made the beasts of the earth according to their kinds, and the livestock according to their kinds, and everything that creeps on the ground according to its kind. And God saw that it was good. Then God said, let us make man in our image, after our likeness, and let them have dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the birds of the heavens, and over the livestock, and over all the earth, and over every creeping thing that creeps on the earth. So God created man in his own image. In the image of God, he created him. Male and female, he created them. And God blessed them. And God said to them, be fruitful and multiply and fill the earth and subdue it, and have dominion over the fish in the sea, and over the birds of the heavens, and over every living thing that moves on the earth. And God said, behold, I have given you every plant yielding seed that is on the face of the earth, and every tree with seeds in its fruit, you shall have them for food. And to every beast of the earth, and to every bird of the heavens, and to everything that creeps on the earth, everything that has the breath of life, I have given every green plant for food. And it was so. And God saw everything that he had made, and behold, it was very good. And there was evening, and there was morning, the sixth day. Thus the heavens and the earth were finished, and all the host of them. And on the seventh day, God finished his work that he had done, and he rested on the seventh day from all his work that he had done. So God blessed the seventh day and made it holy, because on it God rested from all his work that he had done in creation. And so, my hermeneutical interpretation of Genesis chapter 1 is that when God created, God did not create things. God created the differences between things. For each step of the epistemological process, moving from non-existence to existence, it's the separation and distinction between each thing that allows for the thing to be known. Knowledge is existence. Epistemology is existence. God began creating in an eternity of non-existence. And upon the completion of creation, God returns to a point of rest. And so the text defines that in creating the distinctions between nothing and everything, God created the Sabbath. And this to me is the foundation of everything that follows for the rest of the biblical text. My main hermeneutic of the biblical text is the concept that God existed in a state of non-existence, and upon creating, God moved to a state of Sabbath. Last week, I asked this question. How many home runs is it possible for a human to hit in a single MLB season? And I began our discussion in 1876. You also may remember me saying that for a while, hitting home runs in MLB baseball was considered bad strategy. Now, you could undermine the entire argument I made last week with 3 questions. What if I started with a different year? I had said it was known in 1876 it was possible to hit 5 home runs. But if we change the year, the epistemological understanding can change. Maybe prior to 1876, somebody hit more home runs. This is why I defined home runs in the MLB. If the MLB didn't exist, it doesn't pertain to the question I asked. 2, you could ask, what's the definition of a home run? Maybe the definition of a home run I'm using to answer my question is wrong. Or maybe the definition of a home run changed. If we know it's possible for somebody on steroids to hit 73 home runs, and I said it's impossible for anybody ever to hit 74 home runs, but if we defined a home run in the way that my son would like a home run to be defined as, maybe it's possible to hit 1,000,000 home runs. 3, you could change the question. What is baseball? What if what I am calling baseball in order to answer the question is wrong, or had changed, or was defined differently? When did baseball begin? You will find different answers to that question. In fact, baseball itself has evolved and changed in so many ways, even since 1876. The reason I say this is because it is a good way to understand a very important and specific concept. This issue of asking questions of the definition of something is called semantics. Semantics can be a very simple thing. 2 people using 2 different definitions of a word to discuss a thing. Semantics can also be extremely complicated and very elaborate. Some things are incredibly difficult to define. So this brings me to my next point. The law of identity. The law of identity is a foundation to logic. Without the law of identity, we would not have rationality. We would not have math. We would not have anything. The law of identity states that each thing is identical to itself. Or said more simply, each thing is what it is and not what it's not. Each thing has qualifiers or characteristics that collectively are the definition of what a thing is. And each shift in qualification or characteristic creates a new separate definition of a thing equal to only itself. So for example, let us consider the semantics of the definition of a home run. Most people think of a home run as hitting a baseball over a fence. And upon doing so, you round each base and score a point. But a home run can also be not hitting the ball over the fence, but as long as you touch each base and score a point, then it's a home run. I try and imagine the very first home run ever hit. Back when baseball was in its infancy, before it had legally existing entities and organizations that define what it is. Imagine before the home run was defined. I imagine baseballs were expensive to make, expensive to own one. Imagine you're a 10-year-old playing baseball outside with your friends, and the ball gets hit very far in fair territory, but to a place that lands entirely inaccessible. Nobody can get the ball. So the hitter just keeps running and running, and he's very excited because he reached home and scored a point. Maybe we call that a home run. But everyone else playing is super angry because they just lost their ball. It is very easy to imagine in the early days of baseball, a definition of baseball as being bad to hit home runs. In fact, there's an entire movie made about this called The Sandlot. Great movie. Most of us understand that the definition of the game of baseball we played outside in the streets with our friends is different than the definition of the type of baseball that's about to be played in a few weeks called the World Series. One version of the game has defining characteristics where home runs are bad. The other scenario of the game has a defining characteristic where home runs are good. They're both baseball, but the semantic is different. The law of identity is different. Each version is its own thing. It is what it is, and it's not what it's not. The law of identity creates the question, what is the defining traits or characteristics of a thing? What makes a thing what it is, and thus not what it's not? What is, or what are, the fundamental characteristics of the definition of God? You can look all through history, and you could pinpoint the moments in time where a claim is made about who or what God is or isn't. And it's those very claims that are the law of identity of that thing. What are the essential defining characteristics that make Christianity what it is, and thus what it is not? What are the essential defining characteristics that make Judaism what it is? What are the essential defining characteristics of what makes Islam what it is? What are the essential defining characteristics that make any statement pertaining to the definition of the identity of God what it is? Just like with the definition of baseball and home runs, you can have two separate traits that are unique in and of themselves, but are collectively still encompassing of the same thing. There are differences between types of home runs, and they are unique to themselves. And their uniqueness creates a unique definition of baseball, but they are all still baseball. Or maybe the differences are so unique that you can no longer call them both baseball. And so this is the foundational hermeneutical assumption I hold about the biblical text. I believe the Bible is arguing for a specific semantics definition of who God is. If we think about all hypothetical essential defining characteristics of God, we can probably come up with hundreds, if not thousands, if not millions, if not an infinite number of concepts and descriptions of who God is. For all the millions of options of the potential defining characteristics of who God could be, as far as I can tell, one of two things is true. A, either the most logical, entirely unique defining characteristic of God that only God has is the identity of being the creator. Or the biblical text is creating the identity of God as having the most essential defining characteristic of God being the creator. What good is a God that is the same defining essential identity of any other God? What good is anything if anything is equal to everything? What good is a reality if everything is the same? If anything can equal anything, would it be possible to know it exists? If black equals white, would we even be able to know its existence? The law of identity is why humanity can have knowledge. It's why anything can exist. So with that, we are done for tonight. We will continue these thoughts into next week. And yeah, any questions? So I know that's all, there's a lot there. I'm happy to try to just explain these things as vast as I can to anybody that wants more discussion or clarification of it all. But the ultimate goal is trying to take that framework and go through the biblical text and see how they're connected. So